Hi there. Monday, and as usual, we catch up with the markets and see what's happening and what the top stories are with Chris Gibbons. It's brought to you by Capital Legacy, the number one provider of wills and estates. Chris, good day to you. Number one story, and well, no surprises there. It's the ongoing problems we're having as a result of the rioting and looting, isn't it?
Yes, Jeremy, good morning. Absolutely right. Such is the amount of damage that it's difficult really to know where to begin. So let's start at the absolutely the highest level. You've heard, I'm sure, of the four horsemen of the apocalypse. Well, we have the three horsemen, the three L's: lockdown, load shedding, and looting. And they're all equally damaging in their own very vicious way. Looting, well, US bank JP Morgan reckons that the looting part of the equation will pull our economy back by 3% in the third quarter. That's a big number, and also drag down the full year growth. Daily Maverick this morning reporting a figure of minus 0.7 overall effect for the year. And don't forget that between them, Gauteng and KZN, of course, really badly hammered, account for more than half of South Africa's GDP output. So all of this as we were gripped once again by the second of the three L's, lockdown, the battle to contain COVID, which has so far caused excess number of 68,000 deaths. That is a terrifying figure. And the World Health Organization says that the gathering of looters and riots last week will certainly see another spike in cases, and that in itself could already prolong a painful lockdown. But let's not forget that third L, which is load shedding. Load shedding in its way just as deadly from an economic point of view. Financial services firm PwC has just released a research paper which says load shedding last year cost the country an estimated 75 billion rand in lost GDP and an additional 450,000 lost jobs. So apply those numbers to the GDP figures. Last year's 7% decline without load shedding would only be around 4.7%. And if we throw it forward to this year, we're looking at a 50% reduction in GDP and another 275,000 lost jobs. The three horsemen of the South African apocalypse: load shedding, lockdown, and looting.
We'll also be having a look later today, after 4 o'clock, by the way. You can go to the Mansfield Today YouTube site, because we're going to be chatting to two other people. One of them, Mike Anderson, who is the president of the National Small Business Chamber of South Africa. He's going to be looking at the effect the rioting and looting has had on small businesses. And we're also going to be speaking to Clem Santa, scenario planner, on his feelings of where the country is going and how we pull ourselves out of this crisis. Those two, courtesy of Capital Legacy, will be available after 4 o'clock on this channel, so make sure you catch those and download them and take a listen. They should be very interesting as well. Come back to the extent of the damage caused by the looters, Chris. Do we have any sort of idea of that extent?
Well, MoneyWeb's reporting this morning, Jeremy, that figures provided by government are almost certainly on the low side, and by a considerable margin. The South African Property Owners Association puts the figure at 800 stores and 100 malls either burnt or severely damaged. The simple method of aggregating numbers from individual companies used by MoneyWeb estimates that at least 3,000 stores suffered that fate. And that's more than 3 times the figures reported thus far. Pepkor, for example, Pepkor alone says that to date, 489 of its retail stores have been damaged and looted. And meanwhile, Agri-SA is warning of food shortages, particularly in KZN, wants government to set up distribution points to help the affected areas. And another major exporter has declared force majeure. It's Assmang, whose exports of manganese alloys have been hit by the closure of Durban and Richards Bay ports. Transnet, by the way, on Friday said that Durban port and terminal operations slowly starting to normalize, but the experts are telling me that it will take at least 2 weeks to clear the backlogs there.
Chris, what about the question of rebuilding and also insurance as well?
Well, here's the thing, Jeremy. Some businesses will be insured via SASRIA, the state insurer which handles all riot and civil unrest claims. But some will not be insured. And as ever, the bigger the business, the more likely it is to have insurance. So it's the smaller businesses, and I've seen one report which says upwards of 70% of the smaller businesses hit by looting don't have insurance, and they, of course, are majority black owned. But as a number of commentators have observed, key to all of this is the restoration of the artery we call the N3, running between Johannesburg and Durban, the port of Durban in particular. Going into the weekend, it seems as though SAPS and Army have that under control. I've seen reports of what are effectively armed convoys going through with fuel, medicines, and supplies. Armed convoys? I last used that phrase back in the late 1970s when Rhodesia was transforming into Zimbabwe. Here we are again.
Yeah, exactly. And maybe something Advocate Lance Brogden may want to pick up on tomorrow when we speak legal matters, this whole matter of SASRIA and how much is actually in the pot. We'll speak to him about that. Of course, as well as the economic cost, there's also a very high personal cost to this, Chris.
Indeed, direct cost of more than 1,200 dead. The cost of jobs lost because hundreds, if not thousands, of those small businesses we just mentioned will simply not reopen. And the personal cost of lost investment and increased emigration. Lost investment, we're already looking at companies pulling back on investment because of government's handling of the lockdown, booze companies, glass companies, and so on. But just imagine how this looks in New York or London or Paris. Just a couple of weeks ago, French energy giant Total pulled the plug on a major gas investment in northern Mozambique. That was because of violence and unrest. Now, suddenly we've been thrust into the same zone, the same corner. Would you seriously make a major investment in South Africa right now? It's a big question mark. The personal level is also important, I think, because a number of emigration companies, you know, the people who specialize in organizing second passports or right to live in a foreign country, they're reporting a very sharp spike in inquiries from people who just said, enough, time to go. My own extended family has just lost two highly qualified individuals, two young veterinarians off to Australia. Good luck for them. I know a number of folk will say, oh yeah, we don't want them here anyway, blah, blah, blah. But that's very silly because two young vets, each studied for 7 years. That's 14 years of investment in education lost to the country. And the country simply cannot afford to lose that level of investment in education on an ongoing basis.
Absolutely correct, yeah. How's this all affected the markets, Chris?
Well, here's the amazing thing, Jeremy. The answer is not too badly. If we compare Monday morning last week to Friday evening, the JSE All Share was actually up 0.2%, the top 40 up just under 0.4%. Much of that has to do with a sudden streak of weakness on global markets, but also a weaker rand, which helped the rand hedge stocks during the week. Rand itself down over 1% against the dollar on the week, 0.5% against the euro, 0.25% against sterling. The dollar itself up 118 from 119 against the euro. The emerging markets currencies generally doing quite well last week. Investors still searching for yield. Turkey's lira, for example, performing relatively well. Where we did see some movement, but not as much as you might think, the 10-year government bond up to 8.93% from 8.86%. That's just 7 basis points. And I think I was certainly expecting a much bigger movement there. All told, JSE index is still up 12% on the year to date. And given the impact of those 3 Ls, load shedding, lockdown, and looting, I think it could be a great deal worse.
Another number that's down is the price of oil. It's good news for us, but what's going on there, Chris?
Well, oil has just had its worst week in some time, Jeremy, down around 2.5% on Friday evening. Brent crude ending just over 73.50 per barrel on Friday. It's now 72.60 this morning. Why is this, do you ask? Well, it's because a major crack has appeared in the OPEC plus oil cartel, producers cartel. United Arab Emirates levered a deal out of the Saudis to allow a higher baseline for measuring its output cuts. UAE, normally a slavish follower of Saudi Arabia, once they've broken ranks, and this forced OPEC and its allies to agree to a deal to increase production. Brent crude, as I say, trading this morning around 72.60. OPEC now has agreed to initially pump an extra 400,000 barrels per day. ramping up output to 2 million barrels by the end of the year, continuing to increase output to the end of next year. Now, that might not be good for oil producers, but as you say, would definitely be good for us. Don't forget, Brent crude just over $52 a barrel on January the 2nd of this year. Now, as I say, 72.5. That is a jump of more than 40%, 40% in the first half of this year. So my heart is not bleeding for OPEC or any of its chums.
Listen, going back to the JSE for a moment, big deal between Standard Bank and Liberty.
Yes, and it's a curious one because Standard already controls Liberty through a 54% shareholding. According to CEO of Standard, Sim Chabalala, it's going to buy out the minorities and take that to 100%. It's a cash and shares deal. It puts a premium of about 33% on Liberty. The shareholders like that, as you might imagine. Liberty's share was up nearly 23% after the announcement. Chabalala's vision is to create a Pan-African conglomerate offering everything from everything financial, bar the kitchen sink, really, banking, asset management, insurance, wealth management, you name it, it's all in the basket. Sounds great? Well, yes, except there's one problem. The model is known as bank assurance, and it's been tried before, hasn't worked, and it has been discarded. Put simply, the cost of running such a big conglomerate outweighs the benefits of cross-selling. FNB's been there with momentum and ditched it. Old Mutual has broken up its conglomerate structure, very nearly all done there, getting out of Nedbank, things like that. And over the years, don't forget that Liberty has really been up and down to the extent that in a bad year, it has weighed heavily on Standard Bank's own numbers. So might it not have been smarter, Mr. Chabalala, to just have ditched the whole thing completely? I don't know. Time will tell, Jeremy.
Finally, more developments on the ongoing car Powerships saga, I see.
Part of that story comes from Engineering News, which has confirmed Shell South Africa is to be the exclusive supplier of LNG to Car Powerships SA. This, you'll recall, the plan whereby Turkey's Car Powerships moors 5 of its vessels in 3 South African ports with a view to providing emergency electricity. Except the deal would be for 20 years. It would be extremely expensive. It's been knocked back by the Department of the Environment. Well, Engineering News reports that Shell South Africa country chairperson, Hloniphe Mtolo, says he believes the 3 projects would assist the country to address its prevailing electricity shortfall, and he's extremely concerned about delays to the plan. Well, he would be, wouldn't he, with a sweet little LNG deal about to go tits up. The Green Scorpions, however, and this is where Mr. Mtolo needs to take a deep breath, I think, because it's not just the department that's pulled the Car Powerships environmental permits. Green Scorpions believe there has been illegal activity and has handed its docket on the matter over to the Director of Public Prosecutions in North Gauteng. In essence, according to the Green Scorpions, Car Powerships tried to pull a fast one by arguing that it could shortcut the lengthy environmental investigation process because it was an emergency and its power would help government combat the COVID-19 pandemic. Plain as a pikestaff, that is a load of old cobblers. The Green Scorpions are saying, actually, it's illegal old cobblers for that matter. So we'd like to see the perpetrators in court, if you please. Jeremy, let me just end off by saying, when I look at that Car Powerships deal, when I examine it closely, I am absolutely certain that the age of state capture is most definitely not behind us yet.
Oh, on that note, we'll leave it. Chris Gibbons, for your insight, thank you very much. Lovely to talk to you, and we'll catch up once again next Wednesday. Courtesy of Capital Legacy. If in this time of lockdown and social distancing and looting and all the rest of it, Capital Legacy realizes that some clients won't be able to sign their wills according to what the law prescribes, which is an original will, and in this time of the lockdown, they also have to have 2 independent signatures as well. So you've got to have the original will and the one with independent signatures. With lockdown happening, it becomes a bit of a problem. Capital Legacy has implemented a will signing benefit. It means that if you can't get your will in and signed properly, the company itself will commit to covering the costs of a high court application to the sum of 130,000 rand to validate your will, should you pass away without a valid will in place at the time. Capital Legacy, always looking for ways to help. For more information about this, go to www.capitallegacy.co.za. T's and C's apply. As I said earlier while I was talking to Chris, we have two special reports coming up. They'll be released after 4 o'clock today on the Mansfield Today site, courtesy of Capital Legacy. The first one, a discussion with Mike Anderson, the president of the National Small Business Chamber of South Africa, on how this looting and rioting has affected small businesses in South Africa. And the other one with scenario planner Clem Sunter. We'll ask him where he sees the country going in the wake of all of this chaos. So join us for those as well after 4, courtesy of Capital Legacy. Until then, enjoy your day.